Welcome to Help, I'm a Parent, Christian Parenting in the Real World. We're your hosts, Drs. Claudio and Pamela Consuegra, and together we serve as the Directors of Family Ministries for the North American Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Today we will be discussing the risky business of substance abuse. One of the biggest mistakes a parent can make is to think that substance abuse could never happen in their home. Yes, parents, the dangers are in your home and are as close as your medicine cabinet. We're going to look at some of those dangers and risky trends that our teens are engaged in.
We're delighted to be joined today by Dr. Alina Baltazar, the Master in Social Work Program Director and the Associate Professor for the Department of Social Work. In addition, she serves as the Director for the Center of Prevention Education at the Institute of the Prevention of Addiction at Andrews University.
Dr. Baltazar, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I think it's great that you guys are doing this.
Yes, thank you. And before we begin our conversation, though, we'd like to visit with some parents who have expressed their concerns about their adolescents in the area of addiction and that particular area. So let's look at that.
Yes.
I know there's something going on. I read the other day that children or teenagers, they get together and then they all bring different kinds of drugs. Have you read about that?
Yeah, I heard about it. It's called skittling.
Really?
Have you heard about that?
No.
It's crazy because what happens is that kids go into like their medicine cabinets at home and they start grabbing, these pills and they bring it, they put it in this pot or this bowl or whatever in a hat, doesn't matter. And they have it there. And so what they do is that they grab it by the handful and they ingest them.
Wow.
You know that has to just be a teenage brain because no one in their right mind would do
Right?
But I think you hit it right on the spot when we're saying that, at that stage in their life, they do not have that part of the brain that's going to help them make decisions.
that. Well, you couple that with some peer pressure and it's just a bad situation. They're just going to hang out. That's the word, I hear. I'm just going there. I'm not going to do anything. And
Right.
I need to make choices.
It's just this one time.
Right.
Well, that actually happened to me when I was a teenager. I grew up in a Christian home, and so we never drank, we never did anything. But my friends were getting into alcohol, and I was always the goody two-shoes. And so they started doing things and not including me. And I was like, so I fell into that. I can be cool too. I can drink alcohol and.
I get the feeling like they are like just thinking we don't know, we don't have a clue, and maybe sharing some of the experiences we had growing up helps to connect with them. But I think that our kids sometimes think that they, in a Christian environment, don't have to worry about this.
It's true.
But I know that in the high schools and stuff that the kids, drugs are there, they're in there, and trying to get them to realize that they can't even put themselves in the situations or be around it.
Yeah, and those are just such big challenges. I mean, especially because we understand what can happen to them. I mean, you get addicted to these things and your life completely changes.
Yeah.
But they don't see that.
Right.
At that age, they're just having fun.
Dr. Baltazar, I'll never look at candy the same way again. I've never heard of this before. It's a very scary thing. And we'll talk more about that here in a little while. But I want us to begin talking about brain development because it's obvious that the brain of young people, we're talking adolescents ages 13 to 18, 19, is not completely formed as an adult brain. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the brain itself is still the same structure, so it's just the connections that are going on in all of the different parts of the brain as we grow, and what it's doing is our brain is adapting to our environment. And unfortunately, the last part of the brain to actually be wired is that prefrontal cortex that's right about here. Now, the other parts are fully functioning and fully developed, and so that's why the adolescent has a hard time actually realizing that there's a part that still isn't. So like physically they're strong, in fact stronger than their parents. Even intelligence, memory also can be even better than their parents. Just that one area. And unfortunately, yes, that is what makes this time in their life risky.
It's almost like you see adolescents reach for a glass of water and spill it because they're not used to the length of their arm. So they're not used to the brain structure that is developing still.
Right. Right.
So what happens is they're making decisions that are risky. Tell us about that.
And, substance abuse, unfortunately, is one of the things that parents are the most fearful of. And I'm one of them. I have 3 adolescent boys, and I was fearful of my boys entering that time of life because of what we know about the risky behavior, things that I remember happened when I was a teenager, like was shown in the clip.
And, I think the clip also brought another very important point out for us to really take to heart, because in the clip she said, as Christians, we kind of assume that protection is around our kids. We kind of assume, oh, my kid would never do that. My child would never do that. I'm from a Christian home. I haven't taught them that. We don't, we're very strict about that. But I think we need to take heed. So, what could you say to those parents who think, this program is for others. It's not for me as a Christian parent. What would you say to them?
Well, being a Christian parent in a Christian home actually is very helpful and protective, but it's not the only thing that we can do as parents. And so there's some very practical things that I found in my research of just communicating clearly. So sometimes parents think, well, if I talk about it, they'll somehow get the message that I'm okay with it. No, if you're clear about it.
You're planting the thought in their mind.
Plant a thought in their mind since they're very young. And that way they know where you stand, because otherwise they're getting messages from other places. So it's better for them to get very clear messages from you, because they're going to be out on their own with their friends, going to college. They need to know where their parents stand.
So what kind of clear messages? I mean, help us out, define that a little bit. What does that conversation look like that a parent has with their teen child?
Well, and hopefully you've been already talking about it kind of throughout their life. Whenever you have the opportunity, let's say you see someone smoking on TV and say, "Oh wow, smoking, it makes you sick," or I'll see a news story that has someone drowning who was drunk. So I'm like, yeah, see, when you're drunk, these things can happen. So you continue to have those conversations really throughout their life, and then in adolescence is when you're like, okay, so look, we as a family, this is what we do not do. And this is why. So that's the other part. You can't just say don't do it.
Right.
Don't ask why. It's more like don't do it because this can happen, that can happen, or even can talk about relatives or friends or distant friends or neighbors that you knew that actually had some serious problems with alcohol or other substances. So these are some practical things parents can do.
And that's very important, because I hear you saying it's not only one, let's sit down and have an hour conversation about this, but it's those teachable moments, the billboard that flashes by as you're driving, the story on the radio. So I think that's a very important point.
Yeah. Just recently we saw in the news about a young man at a university campus who drank excessively and ended up falling down the steps into the basement and eventually passed away.
Right.
In fact, it became a criminal investigation. So young people think that one drink is not going to affect them. If I just have one beer, if I just have one cup of wine, it's not going to affect us a whole lot. Now, you've done some research on students on campus, university campus, in addiction or abuse, I should say. Tell us a little bit about what you learned as a result of your research.
Well, in college is actually kind of a unique experience developmentally. College students are much more likely to get drunk, binge drink, than the general population. And that includes even in Adventist schools. So yes, they might start off with a 1, but they're partying with their friends and they're maybe not noticing how much they're drinking, and they notice how one drink maybe makes them a little relaxed and they might want more. And the other big concern is if there's a genetic tendency towards addiction, which runs in my family. People who may only start with 1 or 2, it can quickly then add up and actually genetically turn into an addiction. 50% of actually addiction is explained by genetics. So that's the other risk of just having it once.
Wow. So if we are genetically predisposed, that's already a danger sign. And then the second thing is we're surrounded by peers who may encourage you or even challenge you to drink more. And obviously it's of concern to us because we're still talking about a Christian campus, an Adventist university. Is that happening? Is that something that we see often, or?
Well, it's actually fairly rare. So when I compared Adventist University to binge drinking in other state universities, secular ones, it's like 4 times more in the secular schools.
Okay.
So it is definitely less, and it's actually not a whole lot, but still, it could be hundreds on campus getting drunk on the weekends.
Right.
And that's typically where they go. They go to party off campus. And so, but in the Adventist colleges, you don't have the pressure to drink and get drunk. That's one difference you wouldn't have.
Okay.
You have compared to secular schools. So there isn't the pressure. They said you can easily find people who do drink and easily find people who don't drink. So that's one benefit to that kind of Adventist or peers, Christian peers.
So if we look at it from the positive side, if I heard you correctly, it's 4 times more in a public university
Correct.
than it is in an Adventist campus. So it is an advantage to have the sheltering
The environment.
of an Adventist education system.
And that's actually good news. I mean, it's not great news, and we still need to be aware. You know, we can't bury our heads in the sand and think it doesn't happen. It does. But it is encouraging to know that, at least to some extent, Christian schools do protect
Yes, they
our
do.
young people from some of these risky behaviors of substance abuse that we're discussing today.
Now, going back to brain development, so you're telling me that the brain the structure is there, but all the, you use the word, the connections are not completely formed. Does alcohol affect the formation of those connections? Or?
Actually, any substance that you can become addicted to can actually affect that formation. Marijuana, and a lot of people think marijuana, oh, it's harmless, it's no big deal. It actually can hurt the development of the brain and also cognitively. And really what I've seen with people who become addicted when they're a teenager, it's almost like they stay at that place developmentally. They never really grow out of adolescence. So that's another risky thing. You actually can developmentally stay stuck.
It kind of becomes a vicious cycle of sorts. They haven't gotten to a point where they are fully adults and they continue to make decisions that keeps them as
those risky behaviors. Yeah.
So as we talk about substance abuse as a risky behavior, what do you see as in order of prevalence regarding specific substance abuse? What is like the number one?
It's
most
alcohol
common?
still.
Alcohol.
I mean, it's easily accessible, it's socially acceptable. So, you know, if you're in a family that drinks, you know, people do it at holidays, and you don't think of it as a harmful thing. So, and then next, actually, marijuana has actually outpaced smoking. So smoking has been steadily going down. In fact, this is the lowest it's ever been.
Wow.
Marijuana is slowly going up. It's not spiking like you might think with so much legalization of marijuana, but it's slowly going up. So it is now slightly past
Interesting.
smoking. Yeah. So that is something new.
interesting.
people are smoking marijuana more than they're smoking cigarettes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you would think, you know, obviously it's difficult to find cigarettes, or at least for young people to purchase them.
Right.
But you would think that it's even more difficult to find marijuana, and yet they find a way to find it.
Yeah, because of legalization, it's easier to find, and also there's that perception that it's not harmful because it's for sick people, right? So it's actually being sold in at schools and parking lots, even at Adventist schools. So it's a way to have fun, they think, a way to relax at the end of the day. So they don't realize how harmful it is to the developing adolescent brain.
Dr. Baltazar, it's very important what you shared with us about those drugs that are affecting the brain, and we will continue this conversation after a moment. We're going to take a little pause, a little break, but we invite you to come back as we have this conversation with Dr. Baltazar about the effect of substances on the teenage brain. So come back.
You can probably already tell that we will not be able to cover every area, every concern, or every question you may have in the short time that we have together. Parenting will continue to produce new challenges and new questions every day. As our children grow and change, so will the parenting challenges that we will face.
Therefore, our goal is to continue this conversation with up-to-date resources and practical parenting tips online via our website, helpimaparent.org. There you may keep updated on our newly released parenting resources, supplemental products, and find additional material for free download. You're also invited to subscribe to an electronic newsletter, read a blog just for parents, and much more.
In addition to that website, we have a Facebook page where we post daily words of encouragement and resources. So look us up, Help I'm a parent. And remember to share that Facebook post with the friends in your own social network.
It is our desire that this resource will assist you in your God-given role as a parent by using principles that are firmly grounded in the Word of God. Now let's get back to our conversation with today's guests. Welcome back. We continue our conversation with Dr. Alina Baltazar, who's telling us about the effect of substances on the teenage brain. Dr. Baltazar, before we took our pause, you were talking about some substances that are prevalent among young people. You talked about alcohol, probably the most commonly used, and then you said that marijuana is the next one, in fact, even higher than cigarettes now. What other substances are young people using?
Well, one of the interesting trends, as smoking goes down, e-cigarettes are going up. So e-cigarettes, E stands for electronic, right. They're also even being smoked through hookahs. It's kind of, that's more of an Arab cultural thing. So people don't realize, yes, if there's no nicotine in there, so you don't have that tendency to get addicted like you would to smoking cigarettes, and yes, it doesn't have the harmful things that tobacco or that cigarettes would have, but there's still a chemical in there, there's a flavoring in there, and then those who actually get in the habit of e-cigarettes are more likely to actually smoke tobacco cigarettes because they're cheaper, and then also it's a lighter feel to it. In fact, my people that I know who are smokers and try to quit smoking with an e-cigarette, it never works because they just go right back to smoking. So that's the risk. So smoking's going down, but e-cigarettes going up, and then that could maybe lead to more smoking.
So adolescents who are not smoking at all and start with e-cigarettes, it'll probably lead them to cigarettes.
Yes, and that is something that teenagers probably aren't thinking about.
And those who are smoking cigarettes and then try the e-cigarettes is not helping them to quit. They'll probably just go back to them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some people who are benefiting, but the people I know who've tried, it hasn't helped them.
Talk to us about the tendency to use, we want to talk about prescription drug abuse as well as over-the-counter drug abuse in our teenagers. So can you talk a little bit about that?
And this is one of those things that's been a concern for parents lately, as more and more adults are being prescribed medication for pain, for depression, anxiety. Teens are kind of hearing about these things, and they're aware of the effect it might have on them, and they think it's a prescription, it's legal, so it can't be harmful. But they don't realize if you're taking double or triple the dose, how harmful it really can be to them. And of course, if you combine it with other drugs, it can lead to death.
Yes, well, in fact, one of the parents was talking about that game Skittles. I thought that was candy that we like to eat.
It used to be.
But I guess they turned that word into a game that can be very dangerous. So if I understood correctly, they get all the medication at home or in their different homes, whether they are prescribed medication or over the counter, put them in a bowl and then just grab whatever they happen to grab. Well,
and that's one of the challenges, because it's not, today, it's not illegal drugs we have to only be concerned about. It's not even prescription drugs, but it's the cold medicines and those things. I mean, what are you seeing in regards to that? The things that we can walk into a drugstore and purchase without a prescription, or that my medicine cabinet at home might be filled with.
Well, one thing I want to make sure people understand with prescription medication and the Skittles, that doesn't happen as often as parents are afraid it happens. So it's not very common. We aren't seeing it in any regularity. But like you said, the over-the-counter medicines, the cold medicines, that's actually one of the ingredients for methamphetamines. People are making it at home. Now, teenagers aren't doing that so much, but again, that's how powerful some of these medications are, and that's why you sometimes have to go to your pharmacist to go buy it because of that. They're even trying to keep track because people are making methamphetamines or buying a lot of cold medicine. And so that's one way they're trying to regulate it, but still very hard.
Yeah, sometimes to purchase it, they will require an ID form to be able to release it to you. But once they release it to me and it's at home, the kids then have access to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we want to talk to parents about is how would you know if your kids are using or misusing perfectly legal medication, whether it's over the counter or prescribe medication?
Well, one of the easy things to do is check your medicine cabinet. In fact, really what I say to parents is you need to teenage-proof your home. So, we remember those days when we had to toddler-proof our home.
Yes, yes.
Covering up the locking things, covering up plugs. Well, you have to teenage-proof your medicine cabinet. So lock it up, or as soon as you're done, let's say a pain medication you were given 5 days worth, you only needed 1 day, get rid of it. And so we don't recommend you just pour it down the toilet, but actually return it to your pharmacist, find out the proper way to dispose of it.
Some police departments have boxes where you can put the prescription drugs there.
Yes, and then of course, then you look for other unusual behavior. If they're sleepier more than usual, they're more withdrawn, and maybe they're hanging out with different friends. Those are the kinds of things that we look for. They're academically not doing as well because, again, something's going on with the brain. They're being affected, so it's hard for them to function.
Yeah.
And there again, even if I try as a mom to teen-proof my home, I'm not always aware of what's coming on the school bus, with the other teenagers, or what's coming into the classroom, or if my teen is visiting in another home, that home may not be teen-proof, that medicine cabinet. So how far do I go? How far do I go in actually monitoring this, or even talking to making the friends of my own teenager aware of this, making their parents aware?
Well, actually, we say it is good to monitor your kids, even your teenage kids, but not to the point where they're feeling restricted or hovered over, because then they might rebel.
Yeah.
So it is a difficult balance. As I said, I'm in the middle of it right now.
Yes.
To monitor, make sure they know you're watching, and it actually helps to get to know your teen's friends, and then get friendly with their parents, and you can just kind of share, like the clip, just kind of talking about, did you know this? Did you know that? In a very friendly manner. In other words, we're all in this together, and let's see if we can get our kids through this.
Yeah.
So it's not telling them what to do, but just sharing as a concerned parent in a maybe a very casual setting. Hey, did you know what's happening today?
Yeah.
That's good advice.
In your research, did you learn any other trends among young people when it comes to substance abuse?
Well, one thing that also has been a concern is synthetic marijuana. So people think synthetic, it can't be as bad than as the real stuff. That actually can be more dangerous because you don't know what they're putting into it. And so actually can kill. Marijuana hasn't been known to kill, but synthetic marijuana can. So there has been a slight decrease in that because I think people realize how dangerous it is. But that's one of the things that we always want to make sure parents know, that there's also synthetic marijuana.
Okay, define that a little bit. Tell us a little bit more. When you use the term synthetic marijuana, define that for us.
So as I said, synthetic is not actually marijuana, so it's made up, and it could be made up of chemicals, of other plant-based material. So, and again, that's why it can be so dangerous, because you don't really know what's in it.
And whoever makes it decides what they want to put in it. Yeah.
But they're calling it it's being sold as marijuana.
Well, it's called synthetic marijuana,
Okay.
so people do know that. It's just they think it's actually less harmful than marijuana.
Even the actual marijuana, for what I understand, the potency of today's marijuana is a lot higher than back in the, let's say, 60s or 70s.
And that's something parents need to realize. So maybe the parents back in the 70s, and they experimented, or had friends that experimented, they didn't see any harm with it. So they may not be all that concerned when they find out their teenager is doing it. But yes, it is more potent. I mean, come on. People are manufacturing it. It's being sold. They're going to want to make a better product. And people want that better high. And so it is more potent than it used to be. And then, of course, you can be addicted to marijuana. It's not impossible to become addicted. It's actually about as difficult to quit as smoking, is what I've been told, because it's inhaled. So you get that high very quickly.
And for those parents that actually use marijuana, say in the 60s or 70s or 80s, and are saying, I'm not addicted to it. In fact, I quit smoking it a long time ago. So if my kids do it, it's probably a rite of passage. Well, we have heard that marijuana is a gateway drug. It actually can lead to others. Is that also in your research, or have you found?
Well, actually, it can start with alcohol, or even sniffing household products. It's called huffing. Sniffing it can give you a bit of a high. So it can start even at the age of, and actually the average age of people who huff are actually around the age of 14. So it can start with household products. And of course, alcohol is easier to access. Then marijuana is typically the next one, and then it moves on, unfortunately, to the heavier drugs. Of course, now there's the prescription drugs that are also in the mix there as also part of that gateway.
So let's say, as a parent, I know that my child has a problem with any of these substances. What do I do? What's available for me, and what should my steps be in order to get help?
So you do want to take this seriously. In fact, mental health issues are often connected with substance abuse issues. So sometimes, let's say they had a mental health issue, maybe ADHD, where they have a hard time focusing or concentrating, and medication can help maybe calm them down that they just kind of put together. Or maybe they're depressed, and so they may take something to kind of give them an up. Or they have maybe a trauma from their past, and so there's post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you notice these kind of mental health issues, and of course then we throw drugs in the mix, and drugs themselves can also add to mental health problems. So alcohol is a depressant. It can make teenagers depressed. Marijuana is also linked to depression in teenagers. So you really want to know where the help is. In fact, they're realizing more and more the idea of dual diagnosis. Now there's professionals are trying to be trained to deal with mental health issues and substance abuse issues. So you can turn to your local community mental health center. Everyone has one of those in their area. It's kind of one of those government things. You would start there. And then on the internet, there's also resources to help you find a drug rehab, because there's a lot of different rehab facilities. There's some that just do detoxification. Because some drugs, if you stop them suddenly, it can actually lead to death. Alcohol, if you using it heavily, can lead to that. And then there's shorter ones like 7 days. Then there's some that are 30 days, some even up to a year. But they typically start with the shorter ones first.
So you're saying to the parents, this is not just a phase that they're going through. It could be a very serious issue. And so therefore take the steps necessary right away. Could be going to your own doctor or a counselor, or you said the local social services department.
Community mental health.
Community mental health. And maybe they will have to go to some treatment facility. It's not enough to just say they will grow out of it.
Yeah, because it actually changes the brain, especially some of the harder drugs like cocaine. It actually changes the brain and how it functions, and they actually need professional help. And medication actually can help people recover from addiction, but you need a doctor for that. So yes, it is good to start with our doctor.
Yeah, the doctor. And it's interesting, again, you said it again, it is addictive and it alters the brain of your child.
That's right.
It's not just a rite of passage, it's not just a phase they're going through. Dr. Baltazar, thank you so much for being with us. You've been very helpful. The information, I hope, will be also helpful to parents.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful time with you all.
We want to thank Dr. Baltazar for taking the time to join us today. And we'd also like to remind you to visit our parenting website, helpimaparent.org. There you will find additional resources and materials. And join us next time on Help I'm a Parent, when we will continue the conversation about parenting teens in today's world.
Until then, remember that God has called you to be the disciple maker of your child. It is perhaps the most important role you will ever have. Scripture warns us, take heed lest you fall. We need to be realistic about the dangers that our teens face and take proactive steps to protect them. It is our prayer that heavenly angels will place a protective hedge around your children today. Claim His promise, for He is able.